My heart slammed against my ribs as I tightened my grip on the cold metal. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer rage boiling inside me. There she was, Melissa, my wife of 20 years, kneeling before me on the cold wooden floor, her mascara running down her face in ugly black streaks. Pathetic. For once in her life, she wasn't spewing lies. She was too busy sobbing, her hands pressed together in some desperate attempt at prayer. I pointed the gun at her. My voice came out like a growl, low and menacing. You filthy wh*re, you ran away from me 20 years ago, carrying my child in your womb. You robbed me of the joy of being a father. You crushed the best 20 years of my life. Do you really think you deserve forgiveness? She let out a choked sob, shaking her head. But I wasn't done. Not even close. 1 week earlier. I should have known. Melissa had been acting strange for months, but I'd chalked it up to stress. Work. Hormones. Whatever excuse I could come up with to avoid the gnawing feeling in my gut. She had started going out more, dressing like she was 20 again, coming home late with flimsy excuses. I still remember the first time I caught the scent of a different cologne on her. Strong. Overpowering. Not mine. I had asked her about it. She had laughed. A cruel, dismissive laugh. Oh my God, Jason, are you serious? I hugged a coworker today. Calm down. You're so paranoid. Paranoid. That word burned in my skull. She had said it with that infuriating smirk, the one that used to drive me crazy when we were young. The one I used to love. Now, it made me want to put my fist through a wall. That night, as she slept beside me, her phone vibrated on the nightstand. A message. Can't wait for our next round, babe. I froze. My throat went dry. My pulse pounded in my ears. My fingers twitched with the urge to grab her by the shoulders and shake the truth out of her. But I didn't. Instead, I got up, walked into the bathroom, and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. A fool. A pathetic fool. The next day, I decided to do what any man with an ounce of self-respect would do. I followed her. The next day, I followed her. She had left the house in a hurry, claiming she was meeting a friend for brunch. I didn't ask which friend. I already knew she would lie. I took a different car, an old sedan I kept for emergencies, and trailed her through the city streets. She was careful. I had to give her that. She didn't go straight to him. First, she stopped at a coffee shop, sat alone for 10 minutes, and stared at her phone. A show, just in case I was watching. Then she got up, got back into her car, and drove to a hotel on the other side of town. A hotel. Not even his house. Like some cheap escort who knew her place wasn't in his world, only in his sheets. She parked. Waited. And then, a few minutes later, he arrived. He stepped out of his car like he owned the world, some smug piece of garbage who didn't know death was watching from the parking lot. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. He was younger than me, maybe mid-30s, built like a gym rat who spent more time flexing in the mirror than actually working. Melissa stepped out of her car. She didn't even check her surroundings. She didn't even hesitate. She just walked right up to him, threw her arms around his neck, and kissed him like she hadn't seen him in years. Not a quick kiss. Not a guilty kiss. A deep, filthy, hungry kiss. My vision blurred. My breath came out ragged. I forced myself to stay still, to keep watching. They laughed. He said something in her ear. She smirked. That same smirk. Then they disappeared inside the hotel. I sat there for hours, my mind spiraling into places I never thought it would go. I thought about going inside. Busting down the door. smashing his face into the wall. Making her watch as I tore his world apart. But no. That was too easy. That was a burst of anger, a moment of madness. I wanted something deeper. I wanted something that would keep her awake at night for the rest of her life. So I waited. 2 hours later, they emerged, looking disheveled, satisfied. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to stay cold. She kissed him goodbye, got into her car, and drove off like nothing had happened. I let her go. I wasn't done yet. Instead, I followed him. He drove to his house, a nice one, in a wealthy neighborhood. He had money. That explained a lot. Melissa always had expensive tastes. I parked a few houses down, watching, waiting. Then I got out. I walked right up to his door and rang the bell. A few seconds later, he answered, still in the same clothes he had worn to defile my wife. His smile faded the moment he saw me. He knew. Something in my eyes told him. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice steady but cautious. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "You can." And then I broke his nose with a single punch. He staggered back, howling in pain, clutching his face as blood gushed between his fingers. I stepped inside, shut the door behind me, and locked it. "Who the hell are you?" he groaned, stumbling back against the wall. "You already know," I said calmly, wiping my knuckles on my jeans. "Now sit the F*** down before I break more than your nose." He sat. He had no choice. He was bigger than me, but he knew I wasn't here for a fair fight. I was here for something worse. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting toward the stairs. Maybe a wife. Maybe kids. I didn't care. "Listen, man. Shut up." I sat down across from him, tapping my fingers on the armrest of his expensive leather couch. "How long?" I asked. He hesitated. I reached forward, grabbed his wrist, and twisted it hard enough to make him scream. "How long?" 8 months. "Jesus, man, 8 months." I let go. He gasped, cradling his arm. 8 months. 8 months of lying. 8 months of coming home to my bed, my life, my trust, while crawling into his whenever she felt like it. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You married?" He shook his head, still pressing his fingers against his bleeding nose. "Kids?" "No," he mumbled. "Good," I said. "That means there's no one to suffer when I ruin your ****ing life." His eyes widened. "Look, I didn't know she was married at first. She told me she was single." I laughed. I actually laughed. A deep, bitter laugh that filled the room. "And when you found out?" He looked away. "She said it was over with you. That she was leaving." Leaving. I let that word sink in. I stood up, pacing the room, my hands twitching at my sides. "You love her?" I asked suddenly. He blinked. "What?" I turned to face him. "Do you love her?" He hesitated again. "Too long." "Not the way she thinks I do," he muttered. I smiled. "Cold. Empty. Then you won't mind helping me destroy her." He looked at me like I was insane. Maybe I was. Maybe I had finally crossed the line between sanity and the abyss. But I didn't care. "You're crazy," he muttered, shifting uncomfortably on his expensive couch, still cradling his bleeding nose. I took a slow step toward him. "I could have walked in here and smashed your head against the wall," I said, voice calm. "I could have dragged you outside, made a show of it for your perfect little neighbors. But I didn't." He swallowed hard. "I'm giving you a chance," I continued, "to make this right. Not for me. Not for her. For yourself. He shook his head. I don't. I moved fast. Too fast for him to react. My hand shot out and gripped his throat, squeezing just enough to make his breath hitch. Just enough to make him realize how serious I was. You're gonna do exactly what I say, I whispered. Or I'll make sure you regret every second you spent with my wife. His eyes were wide now, darting to the door, to the windows, calculating his chances. There weren't any. I let go. He coughed, rubbing his throat, nodding furiously. Okay, he gasped. Okay. Just tell me what you want. I smiled. Melissa came home that night acting like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just spent the afternoon tangled up in another man's sheets. I watched her move around the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine, humming under her breath. Carefree. Relaxed. She even kissed my cheek like she wasn't the most disgusting liar I had ever known. How was brunch? I asked, keeping my voice casual. She turned, barely looking at me as she took a sip. Oh, you know, the usual. Rachel wouldn't shut up about her new diet, and Jessica's still trying to fix her disaster of a marriage. I smiled. Sounds exhausting. You have no idea, she sighed, shaking her head. Then she flashed me that smirk. The one she had given him. The one I used to love. I clenched my jaw. I ran into an old friend today, I said, watching her carefully. Someone from way back. She barely reacted. Oh yeah? Yeah. Real interesting guy. We had a lot to talk about. Something flickered in her eyes. It was quick, so quick I almost missed it. But I saw it. A slight hesitation. A tiny, almost imperceptible pause. I took another step forward, closing the distance between us. You know what's funny? I said. He knew a lot about you. She set her wine glass down with just a little too much force. Jason, what are you getting at? I tilted my head. I'm saying it's a small world, Melissa. A long, tense silence. She let out a breathy laugh. Jesus. You're acting weird. I smiled. Am I? Her eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. A nervous tick. She was trying to calculate something. How much time she had. How much I knew. I let the silence stretch, let her marinate in her own anxiety. Then my phone buzzed. Right on time. I pulled it out, holding it up so she could see the screen. A message. From him. I can't do this anymore. I told him everything. I'm sorry. She paled. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. I watched her carefully, waiting for it. The excuse. The lie. The last desperate attempt to dig herself out of the grave she had spent 8 months digging. Jason, she started, her voice shaking. I held up a hand. Don't. She swallowed. Her eyes darted to the door. To the stairs. Fight or flight. I could see the war happening in real time inside her head. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I want you to sit down, I said, my voice low. Commanding. She hesitated, then slowly sank into the chair across from me. I sat too, resting my elbows on the table, lacing my fingers together. You're going to tell me everything, I said. Every single thing. Her breath was shaky. Jason, please, I slammed my fist on the table so hard the wine glass rattled. She jumped, eyes wide, pulse hammering at the base of her throat. Everything. She took a shuddering breath. And then, finally, she broke. Tears spilled over her cheeks, but I didn't care. Not this time. Not anymore. It just happened, she whispered, shaking her head. I don't know how, I swear. We started talking, Anne. Don't, I cut in sharply. Don't insult me with clichés. She sniffed, biting her lip. It didn't mean anything, she tried. I leaned back, exhaling through my nose. That's worse. She shut her eyes, fresh tears streaming down. I was unhappy. I laughed. You seemed pretty ing happy this afternoon. Her face crumpled. Jason, please. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. You're gonna pack a bag, I said, my voice eerily calm. You're gonna walk out that door, and you're never coming back. Her breath hitched. Wait. You're leaving tonight, Melissa. She shook her head rapidly, her hands reaching for mine. No, Jason, we can fix this. Please, I made a mistake, but I love you, I grabbed her wrists, pried her fingers off me, and threw them back at her. Love? I scoffed. You don't get to say that word to me. She sobbed, her whole body trembling. I nodded toward the stairs. Pack. Now. She hesitated. I reached into the drawer, pulled out my gun, and set it on the table with a loud clunk. Her breath hitched. I wasn't pointing it at her. Not yet. But she got the message loud and clear. Don't make me ask again, I said. And just like that, the last bit of defiance in her eyes shattered. She pushed back from the table, stumbling toward the stairs. I watched her go, my fingers drumming against the wood. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She thought leaving was the end of her suffering. She had no idea. I watched her stumble up the stairs, her hands gripping the railing like her legs might give out any second. Good. She should be scared. She should feel the same helplessness I'd felt when I read that message, when I saw her kiss another man like I didn't exist. She disappeared into the bedroom, and I listened. The frantic shuffling of clothes. The sound of drawers opening and closing too fast. The zipper of a suitcase catching. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the gun on the table. It wasn't for her. Not yet. It was for control. For reminding her that I wasn't the same idiot who had kissed her goodbye this morning, trusting that she was actually going to brunch with friends. A minute later, she came back down, dragging a half-zipped suitcase behind her. Her makeup was smeared, her hair a mess, and her lips trembled like she wanted to say something but didn't dare. She shouldn't. Keys, I said. Her brows furrowed. What? I flicked my eyes toward her purse. Leave the house key. And the car. She hesitated. Jason, please. I stood. The movement alone sent her scrambling to dig through her purse. A second later, her shaking fingers placed the keyring on the table. I don't have anywhere to go, she whispered. I smirked. Should have thought of that before you spread your legs in a cheap motel. She flinched like I'd hit her. Good. For a second, I thought she might break again, collapse into that fake sobbing routine she always used when she wanted to manipulate me. But she didn't. Instead, something shifted in her eyes. And then, just like that, the tears stopped. She straightened her shoulders, her lips pressing into a thin, ugly line. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I raised a brow. Throwing you out? Yeah. A little. She scoffed. God, you're pathetic. I laughed. Actually laughed. Says the woman begging to stay in a house she doesn't deserve to set foot in. Her eyes burned into mine, but I saw something else there now. Something colder. Calculating. She wasn't afraid anymore. No. She was planning. She reached down, grabbed her suitcase, and yanked it toward the door. You think you've won, she muttered under her breath. I tilted my head. Haven't I? She gripped the doorknob but didn't turn it. Instead, she turned her head just enough to throw one last dagger over her shoulder. I was going to leave you anyway, she spat. I just hadn't figured out the easiest way yet. The words sliced through me, sharp and precise. I should have expected them. Should have seen them coming. But something about the way she said it, so casual, so cruel, made my fingers twitch toward the gun again. She smirked. Guess you saved me the trouble. And then she was gone. The door slammed behind her, leaving nothing but silence. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where she had been. The air still smelled like her perfume. My hands curled into fists. I should have felt victorious. But something was off. That look in her eyes before she left. That sudden shift. That wasn't defeat. That was a warning. 2 days later, I found out what she meant. I was at work when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered, barely paying attention. Yeah. A woman's voice. Smooth. Professional. Is this Jason Carter? I frowned. Who's asking? This is Detective Harper with the City Police Department. We need you to come down to the station for questioning. I stiffened. My grip on the phone tightened. Questioning for what? A pause. Then. A domestic violence report has been filed against you. Everything inside me went still. For a second, I thought I misheard. Then the rage came. Slow. Burning. Melissa. That bitch. I exhaled through my nose, forcing my voice to stay calm. By who? You'll be informed of all details when you arrive. Are you able to come in today? I almost laughed. Of course. Of course, she had a plan. Of course, she didn't just walk away. She was setting me up. She was trying to destroy me. I clenched my jaw, staring out the window of my office, watching the city move like nothing had changed. Like my entire world wasn't unraveling. I'll be there in an hour, I said, and hung up. Then I sat back, rubbing a hand down my face. Melissa thought this was over. She thought she had me cornered. She thought she could play dirty and walk away clean. She had no idea what I was capable of. If she wanted war, she was about to get it. I walked into the police station with my head high, but my blood was boiling. Melissa was good, better than I gave her credit for. She didn't just leave, she set the house on fire on her way out, hoping I'd burn in the aftermath. A young officer led me to a small interrogation room, all gray walls and flickering fluorescent lights. No windows. Just a table, 2 chairs, and a camera in the corner. A few minutes later, Detective Harper walked in. Late 40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She sat across from me, flipping open a folder. You know why you're here, she said. I leaned back, arms crossed. Something about a domestic violence report? She studied me, waiting. I smirked. Let me guess. My wife, sorry, ex-wife, walked in here with some tears, told you I pointed a gun at her, and you believed every word? Harper didn't blink. She had bruises. I barked out a laugh. From what? Tripping over her own lies? Harper slid a photo across the table. A close-up of Melissa's arm. Faint bruises, nothing major, but enough to raise questions. Enough to make me look like a monster. She claims you grabbed her and threw her to the ground before forcing her out, Harper continued. I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against the table. Melissa was playing dirty. But I knew the game better than she did. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Detective, did she happen to mention why I threw her out? Harper tilted her head. She said you've been paranoid. Controlling. That you accused her of things she never did. I laughed again, shaking my head. Right. Because catching your wife screwing another man in a cheap motel is paranoia. Harper's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Doubt. I pulled out my phone, tapped a few times, and slid it across the table. A photo. Melissa, half-dressed, tangled in bedsheets, lips pressed against another man's neck. His face wasn't fully visible, but it didn't matter. Harper picked up the phone, studying it. Where did you get this? I smirked. From the guy she was sleeping with. Her gaze snapped back to mine. Funny thing, I continued. Melissa never told him she was married. When I confronted him, he folded like a cheap suit. Sent me everything. Texts, pictures, even a voice recording of her saying she wanted to figure out the easiest way to leave me. I leaned back, enjoying the way Harper's jaw tightened. She played you, I said, voice even. Just like she played me. Harper sat in silence for a moment. Then she sighed and closed the folder. I'll look into it. I knew what that meant. They weren't arresting me. Melissa's little plan had failed. I walked out of that station with a sick sense of satisfaction. She wanted to bury me. Instead, I just planted the first shovel of dirt over her grave. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't go home. I drove straight to Melissa's sister's house. I knew she'd be there. She had nowhere else to go. When I pulled up, the lights were on. Curtains drawn. But I could see movement inside. I stepped out of the car, walked up the driveway, and knocked. Silence. Then, footsteps. The door opened just a crack, and there she was. Melissa. Her eyes widened, but she masked it quickly. What do you want? I smiled. To talk. She scoffed. We have nothing to talk about. I pushed the door open and stepped inside before she could stop me. She stumbled back, eyes darting toward the hallway like she was about to call for backup. I shut the door behind me. Nice try at the police station, I said. Almost had me. She crossed her arms, regaining some of that fake confidence. If you laid a hand on me, they'd still arrest you. I grinned. Would they? Because the detective I spoke to seemed real interested in the proof I gave her. You know, the texts. The photos. The voicemail. Melissa's face twitched. Just for a second. Then she laughed. You think you've won? I shrugged. You tell me. She licked her lips, thinking. Then she tilted her head. You know what the difference between you and me is, Jason? I waited. She stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper. I'm not done. Then she smiled. A slow, cruel smile. And for the first time, I realized something. Melissa wasn't just a liar. She was a dangerous one. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. I stared at her, the air between us charged like a storm waiting to break. She thought she was untouchable. She thought she still had cards to play. I stepped in closer, just enough to make her take a half step back. Good. Let her feel what it's like to lose control. You're not done. I repeated, my voice low. Melissa, you don't have a clue what done looks like. Her smirk faltered, but she recovered fast. Oh, I do, she said, tilting her head. And you're going to find out soon enough. She was bluffing. She had to be. The police already had my evidence, and there was nothing left for her to twist. Unless. I narrowed my eyes. Unless she had something I didn't see coming. I stepped back, exhaling through my nose. Whatever game you think you're playing, it's over. She let out a breathy laugh. Sweetheart, you don't even know what game we're playing yet. I didn't respond. I just turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. The second I was in my car, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, half expecting the cops again. Yeah. A deep voice, smooth and amused. You shouldn't have done that, Jason. I went still. Who is this? The voice chuckled. You already know. And I did. The guy. The one she was screwing. I clenched my jaw. You've got some balls calling me. Oh, I've got more than that, he said. See, Melissa and we've been planning this for months. And you just made it a lot more fun. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. What the hell are you talking about? Check your email. The line went dead. I pulled over, heart pounding, and opened my inbox. A new email. No subject. Just an attachment. A video. I hit play. The screen filled with Melissa, sprawled out on a hotel bed, giggling into the camera. And then I heard my own voice. I swear to God, Melissa, if you don't get the hell out of my house. My stomach dropped. They had edited it. Taken my words from different conversations, stitched them together. And then. Gunshot. The screen cut to black. I sat there, my pulse thundering in my ears. This was bad. Worse than I thought. They weren't just trying to ruin me. They were trying to frame me. I hit dial on the unknown number. No answer. I clenched my fists. If they wanted war, they were about to get it. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Not when I knew what was coming. Instead, I drove straight to the one person who might still have my back. Mike. We hadn't talked much in the past year. Life happened. Work. Distance. But he was still my best friend. And he was the only person I trusted right now. I pulled up to his house, banged on the door, and waited. A moment later, he opened it, blinking in surprise. Jason? What the? I need your help, I said, pushing past him inside. He shut the door behind me, frowning. What's going on? I turned to face him, ran a hand down my face. Melissa is trying to set me up. His expression hardened. Set you up for what? Murder. Mike's brows shot up. Jesus. I pulled out my phone, showed him the video. He watched in silence, jaw tightening as the fake gunshot rang out. Tell me you have the original recordings, he said. I shook my head. I didn't even know they had this. Mike exhaled sharply, pacing. Okay. First, you need to get ahead of this. The second this video surfaces, you're screwed. I nodded. That's why I came to you. He stopped pacing, looked me in the eye. What are you willing to do? I didn't hesitate. Anything. Mike smirked. Good. Then he grabbed his keys. Because I know where we can start. An hour later, we were parked outside a bar on the edge of town. Mike tapped the wheel, eyes scanning the lot. Melissa's little boyfriend? He's not as smart as he thinks. I raised